We'll use it of it. I guess I'd like to call together the special May 6th Board of Public Works meeting. And moving right along to the operational budget change that we're here for.
Are you red?
I'm blue. 3.
All right, well, first off, thank you everybody for coming out and on short notice and getting to listen to what's going on a little bit here. If you will recall, last meeting we approved our budget for next fiscal year, and we had talked about a couple timing benchmarks that we would use for next fiscal year to kind of determine our purchase power cost. And the very first one that we had mentioned was the capacity auction. And as you know, capacity by far has been our most volatile component of our purchase power over the last 3 to 4 years. And so what we have here is the results of that auction, which were posted on Thursday, April 25th, which was a couple days after we had last met. And so essentially the budget that we had approved at that meeting had indicated a capacity cost to us of about $938,000, which assumed the auction clearing prices about the same as they were the previous year, which was an average of about $22 a megawatt day. What you see here up on the screen is the results of that auction. And we, like you know, are in Zone 5, which is really the smallest zone there, Missouri. And every single zone in the auction cleared at an average price that you can see there of around $22, except for Zone 5. You can see there in the fall, the price per megawatt day is fall and spring is $719.81, which is the maximum price that it could possibly clear at, which is known as CONE, or cost of new entry. So the assumption that we had in the budget of $938,000 for capacity skyrocketed because of that to where we are now anticipating needing to pay substantially more than that, about an increase of about get you the exact cost here, $3.9 million for capacity for next year above what we had budgeted. Okay, so that was the results of that auction. And so we worked that into the budget, and in doing so, reworked our rate increase, and then we found out additional information that in addition to the increased clearing price for capacity from the auction, any hedges that you had for capacity that were outside of your zone were no longer able to be counted. So essentially, if you had a hedge in Zone 4, which is where we had our 2 hedges, you were no longer able to use those towards your capacity requirements. And they were also subject to the CONE price that you see there. And so that basically meant that whatever capacity that we needed for the fall and the spring was subject to the clearing price of just under $720 a megawatt day. And so that was an additional adder to what we anticipated for paying for capacity next year. So if we put that straight into the budget with the added cost of capacity, that dropped our estimated debt service coverage ratio to a negative 2.96 for next year. Obviously, that is well in default of our required rate covenant of 1.25. And so in addition to the negative debt service coverage ratio that we had estimated, it also showed a reduction in our cash reserves by an additional $3.9 million, which is the exact cost of that added capacity. which would bring our total cash reduction for next fiscal year to $5.3 million, which is not sustainable for our cash reserve policy. So as such, we have worked the rate increase for October of 2024 from 2% to what we originally had to 15.8% for this October. And so that increases our estimated coverage ratio to 1.26 and then generates an additional $3.2 million of revenue, which will lessen that hit to our cash reserves. The increase to the rate increase to 15.8% for the average residential customer would be approximately $24.94 a month to his or her bill, and then that's in addition to the water rate increase that we had in there as well. So those changes are now all reflective in the budget that I emailed out to you late Friday afternoon, evening, which shows the net loss for the BPW as a whole for next fiscal year is now $201,000. And we have a budgeted company-wide cash reduction of $3.2 million. And before I even ask if there's any questions, I can give you some, you might want to know some color on this situation with the capacity. Basically what MISO stated is that the main reason, I think it's on that next slide, Matthew, the main reason for the jump in cost for our zone in particular, no, it'd be the next one, sorry, was due to what they're saying, seasonal outages and reduced capacity. Basically, what you'll see there is that in the previous year, this is the fall specifically, we had a surplus of 2,400 megawatts, which is the bright green bar there. So we cleared our requirement pretty handedly. And then the next column over is increased LCR. That's your load clearing requirement. So that's basically just your overall increase expected in load. Reasons for that would be there be an expectation for more electric vehicles, more just electric appliances, things like that. Just the whole electrification of the grid would be leading to that 2,000 megawatt increase in the LCR. Next column over is retired coal, and so that's 1,100 megawatts of coal plants, baseload generation that is expected to come offline within Zone 5 next year. Next one is PO exclusions. PO stands for planned outage. And so during the fall, particularly fall and spring, are your most common times for these larger natural gas and coal plants to have outages for maintenance and things like that. And so there's a 557 megawatt hit there. Higher accreditation pushed our number back up a little bit. They redo those numbers every year to determine how much capacity you can actually get out of a generator, whether it be coal, natural gas, even solar, wind, things like that. That gave us an overall deficit in the fall in Zone 5 of 872 megawatts. And specifically, the main reason this was so unexpected to not only us at the BPW, but all the consultants that had been giving us information and advice is really that retired coal bar there. And so that 1,100 megawatts almost exactly represents a particular coal plant down in St. Louis that's known as Rush Island. Rush Island is Ameren, Missouri's third largest coal plant. It has been operating since the 1970s, and during that time it has went through several upgrades, and in doing so, Ameren, every time it did those upgrades, I think the most recent was in 2007, Ameren violated certain acts or certain parts of the Clean Air Act. And so essentially a lawsuit was filed against Rush Island in 2011 that said that basically you either have to shut this down by this date or make these certain types of changes. And so it's kind of been in limbo since 2011, going back and forth with some mitigation efforts made by Ameren and the DOJ and Sierra Club both getting involved. We could go on, but long story short is it was ordered to be shut down in 2023. Well, what happened in 2023 was MISO realized that the grid without Rush Island would not be adequate. And so they did what's called a supplemental standby resource, an SSR agreement, which is basically a lifeline for that coal plant that says you will be used as an emergency resource to maintain grid stability. And there was a hefty penalty that was to be paid as part of that. And so we've been paying that penalty to keep Rush Island online to the tune of about $50,000 a month for the last year since 2023. Well, a week before the auction started in the last week of March, the DOJ finally released a statement or a court order, that put an end to that SSR and put basically a final requirement that if you didn't meet these mitigation requirements by May 1st, you had to shut down within 6 months. And so that pulled the lifeline on that SSR, and Ameren finally admitted or has stated that coal plant will be offline October 1st. And so that was a 1,200 megawatt plant, and so you see there that the retired coal bar for about 1,100 megawatts, which would have been the accreditation on that plant, is what pushed us under our deficit. Again, that happened the last week of March. Nobody saw it coming. In fact, MISO had announced that they would be operating under that SSR agreement for an additional year leading up to the auction. And so that DOJ court order, whether you think it's political or not, it came out of nowhere and surprised everyone. And so outside of that, we're looking into other utilities within Zone 5 that were impacted. MPUA obviously is looking into this with us. This isn't the first time this has happened in MISO. It's obviously the first time that it's been this massive, just because of the additional complexity with adding in seasons to where it's not just one price for the whole entire year. It's seasonal now, and so it changed some of those requirements. But the last time it happened was obviously to everyone within MISO 3 years ago when we paid the $3.4 million. And before that, it happened to Michigan in 2020, where they paid a cone price where everybody else cleared low. And then before that, I think it was 2011 to Illinois. So we've got the budget redone. Again, including the added capacity cost that we would see of $3.9 million over what we had originally budgeted, so a total cost of about $4.8 million. We have the rate increase in there, increased from 2% to 15.8% in October, and that, again, leads to a budgeted net loss of $201,000. So what we would need to do is have you reapprove the budget. Again, that is required to be provided to City Hall by May 15th. And so the budget that we had already approved no longer is adequate or relevant. And so that's what we're looking at tonight. But happy to take on any discussion or questions you have before we do that.
A question, the hedge issue, if we have a legal hedge, who can override that? In other words, and not, since it's in Zone 4,
Yep.
How does that work?
Yeah, and I skipped right over that. Matthew, if you go back, our hedging process, we go out and we did, back to the map, if you could. We go out and do indicative pricing to try to get hedges any way we can. Obviously, a hedge within your own zone is the most attractive. there was not, I think we went out 3 or 4 times throughout the last year for indicative pricing, which basically is a feeler for companies to kind of give you some pricing. Not a single time in those 3 or 4 times that we did that was there an available hedge in Zone 5. If you look at the area there, you know as well as I do that there's not much there. We're talking some coal plants, some natural gas. There is a nuclear facility, but not a whole lot of wind, not a whole lot of solar, not a whole lot of
You're
hard
talking
assets.
4 or 5?
Zone 5, yeah.
Okay.
But to answer your question, Bill, so what we did when we went out to get these hedges is we had to settle for Zone 4, which is also where Prairie State is located. And so you would think it's a hedge. We're good. Well, what MISO said is that you are no longer able to cross zonal lines whenever the price of capacity hits cone. You can do it all day long if you're clearing at the same price. But whenever there's a difference in price, we're no longer going to recognize that hedge, and we're going to penalize you for not having that capacity available within your zone. And so that was obviously unexpected by us, unbeknownst to us, when we had went out and got those hedges. Wouldn't have mattered because there was nothing available in Zone 5. We obviously would have much rather had a hedge available in Zone 5 if we could. Now, the difference with Prairie State is that it has a special HUC designation, which because of its tenure as a hard asset, it basically is allowed to be included as capacity within our zone. And so MISO hasn't officially said this yet, but we are expecting them to on May 21st to say that that capacity that you have with Prairie State is a Zone 5 resource. Because you've went out and you've secured that capacity for your zone, we'll recognize it as capacity within your zone because of that special designation that Prairie State has. These other 2 hedges that we had in Zone 4 do not have that special designation based on the type of asset that they are.
But it still has to be the blessing of MISO to make that HUC actually. So it's still an annual decision by MISO whether or not to allow even the grandfathered anything from Zone 4 or any other zone to be considered in.
So MISO can override our contract, basically, for that hedge. And we agree to
Yes.
that because we're a member of MISO.
Yes,
Crap.
yes.
Okay.
I mean, it really is almost illogical and makes you question what
Yeah, why?
even the point of a hedge even is.
Yeah, if they can pull it out from under you.
I mean, that's exactly where we're at.
Yeah.
It defies a lot of logic in my mind.
If next question is month over month, I know, we're obviously heading to a budget adjustment here that's significant. So can we as a board, we approve this budget and we get 6 months down the road and the world turns upside down again, I mean, for the better, I'm an optimist.
Mm-hmm.
Can we adjust that rate adjustment?
Absolutely.
And do basically an amendment to our budget?
Absolutely. That's what I think we talked about before, that we were trying to make sure that we were inside our covenants of borrowing, that we have to have our ratio, our debt ratio within that 1.25, and that we're aiming to hit that and make it. And we said we had benchmarks that we were going to be watching. We're going to continue to watch that. And so if we have to come back in 3 months or 6 months and present and make a change, we're going to bring that to you. And it would be a budget adjustment and then an action that follows that. But yes, we will, we've got to be more and more able to pivot and change direction because of the volatility of things like this. And so if you were to, I don't think there's many people out there, if you were to look at this, you always look at the summer and winter, that those are your peak, those are your problem child areas. With Ameren dropping off that plant, they let us know, like I said, at the very end of March, within 2 weeks of this auction. So if there had been anything out there to even hedge, which there was none, you'd had 2 weeks to try and get something in place, and that would have been frankly, just it doesn't work timely wise. And so they'd really been, I feel like we've been painted into a corner with no good option.
Maybe we'll get to this, but obviously we're a small community, but Kirksville or Kirkwood
Yeah.
and the urban areas in the Metro East or the metro area obviously have a large impact on their.
We know of 5 others that are in the same bucket that are also, and so we're talking with them through MPUA to see if there's a legal action that we can take either with MISO or whatever. We have some good legal attorneys that are working on it that know it. We'll see where we can go from there.
That legal action would be with MISO or with the auction?
I don't know if it would be with MISO or even with FERC. So FERC is kind of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. They're over all of your different transmission organizations. So they're over the MISO, the PJM, the EPCO, and all the things that are out there. Mm-hmm. And so FERC is their boss. We would have to take something to them, or we go directly to MISO. It all depends on what the attorneys say we have a right or an ability to complain or to ask redress. So we're still waiting to see. And I believe that's just appropriate due diligence that I have to do to make sure that we're being represented.
What's the timeline on that?
It's still, so they're still waiting for that HUC, the HUC, to see if they're going to allow us to even use our existing hedges from Zone 4 in Zone 5, if that's accepted or not. And then that would be, whichever way it leans depends, kind of gives some direction.
Yeah, if those hedges are for this fiscal year,
Yes.
I think we have 2 of them or 3.
24, 25, we've got 2 others additional to Prairie State.
Mm-hmm. Yep, they go by a planning year, which almost mirrors ours. It starts June 1st.
Okay.
And goes through May 31st. The one hedge is a 10-year hedge, and then the other is just for next planning year.
Can you refresh me on what the water increase is going to be?
The water increase was 3%.
3%,
Yeah.
okay, I'd love to confirm that. So this, the rate increase will start in October, is that what you said?
Correct.
I don't know when public comment is. Paul, are you saying there is a rate increase above the rate increase you've already reported?
Yes, the budget that we would be approving includes a rate increase above the rate increase that was already approved at the last meeting.
Okay, and you are,
Robert Matz, President, Hannibal LaGrange University.
there you go. Okay,
I believe
Thank
we're
you.
your 5th largest, 6th largest client, somewhere in that range.
Something like that.
thank you.
Well, I think we'll have a public, if you want to.
I didn't know what it was.
Yes, okay.
There was no agenda distributed or to get at the door, so
Yep.
thank you. Thank you for letting me speak out of turn.
That's okay.
So, and then the other big utility impacted is Ameren. They'll have to, what they can operate under is what we've talked about before, a PPCA, Purchase Power Cost Adjustment, where similar to what Liberty would do is they could just pass that on based on an algorithm or calculation for the trailing 12 months onto their customers. Or no, I take that back. They have to take it to the Public Service Commission when they do a rate increase, which I don't know if they've already done that or not, but I'm sure they'll be.
And Ameren's mostly in Zone 4, are they in 5?
Oh, they're definitely in both Ameren, Illinois, and Zone 4, and then Ameren,
Missouri.
or Missouri, in
Okay,
Zone 5.
all
Yep.
right. I didn't,
They're
I
by
knew they
far
were in
the-
Illinois.
They're by far the biggest player in Zone 5, both on generation and distribution.
I guess I'm wondering about the public response, if there is any in St. Louis area. Unfortunately, we don't get a whole lot of St. Louis news here. But if it's that big of impact on us, what's happening there? And what's the conversation, I'm sure.
Like I
Little
said, we know,
online digging, I guess.
yeah, we got Kirkwood, Fulton, Columbia, a couple others.
Big communities.
Yeah, that are getting hit with this. And so we don't, I think we've tried to get this out as quickly as possible. We've not sat on it. This has happened just recently, so last weekend. So we're trying to get it out there as quick as we can.
And do we have something prepped for media outlet?
Not yet,
Not yet, okay.
not yet.
So Darren, what covenant requires that we only use MISO? They're just the only game in town?
It's kind of the only game in town. That's the region in which we land, and so that they govern the transmission and those things. Could we opt out of MISO? I'd have to check and see. I believe there's still a 3-year, I think you can, but you end up really hanging out there. That
It's
becomes,
subject to market rates then?
yeah, it can, and you're out trying to find, anyway, I think we can look at that, but that would be a very big step.
Yeah, and keep in mind, before we were self-managed, we did full requirements, and our purchase power cost was $24 million a year, and that was back in, I guess we went to self-managed in 2017, and since doing that, our purchase power has been between 16 and 20 million. Now with this increase, it will still jump to about 21.2 million total, but when you're talking about a full requirements plan, yeah, you are pooled with several other entities, but these types of increases are all passed along, and that's across the board. So if we're saving potentially on energy or on one component of our purchase power, it would help us. But paying $24 million back in, I think, 2016 or whatever it was, I'm sure would be much greater than what we're paying now, even with this increase.
So who does this $719.81 ultimately go to?
It goes to the generators. They end up taking this money, they take and MISO gives it to generators. The whole idea is that this is a way of incentivizing someone to build generation. So that's the entirety of this transfer of funds is. So I get a little bit, I'm not going to get into supposition right now. But I think there's some generation there that even though they came offline, perhaps they benefit by having other generation that they're going to get paid for on the other hand. So that's not difficult to see, I don't believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so if you're a generator in Zone 5, that's the value of your generation, so that you're making that in revenue, that $719. And so there's very much the expense is being offset by the revenue made by the generator. They call it it's supposed to be the calculated cost of the overnight cost of what it would take to build a natural gas facility is the value in that, just like Darren said.
And the problem is you don't have anybody that's building anything with what's called a spinning reserve, something that you can actually call on in the middle of the night. Mm-hmm. Almost all of the generation that's getting built is solar and renewables because you've got governmental input along with that. And so you're not doing anything to solve this hole. And in fact, MISO is taking and down rating the existing spinning reserves. Instead of, Prairie State coming in at 20 megawatts, it comes in at 19 and then 18 and 17. So they're actually reducing the amount of capacity that we're getting off of those actual generating plants. So I don't have an answer other than maybe we need to look at building our own turbine or something like that to have our own generation. We look at those, we know that those diesel generators that we had out here were not good. We got rid of them. Boy, they sure look good today. So there's It's the market I've never seen moving so fast and so volatilely. And I would have never bet that your summer and winter would have been your low prices versus fall and spring, especially winter price of 75 cents. So,
Is there a way, probably not, but we don't have any way of knowing if it's gonna go up again? And when can it go up again?
so what we're anticipating, again, talking to consultants, and you're gonna, who's got that crystal ball? I know nobody, but I do not see next year improving at all. One of the things that we could hope for is that we've got the grain belt that hopefully can start to move, but even then, they're looking at that in 2030, that it's been moved out, 2028 to 2030. That would be something that if we could have anybody push on that and hear our voice that this is really a good thing, that's fighting against farmers and property rights, and that's a tough one. But again,
Doesn't add to capacity much, does it?
doesn't, but it helps us. It would sure help us because we could, the price of that, it will be very good. And even a couple megawatts of capacity. Again, whether they give us credit because that's coming from outside of our zone, I don't know.
So this still isolates our income from Prairie State to whatever Zone 4 generates. So we're not going to get any increase in the payment that we get from Prairie State through this.
It'll stay the same.
Right.
Because it should be based on Zone 4's capacity and generation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the energy component, is that what you're referring to? Those revenue credits? Yeah,
Right.
That's all based on energy, which is separate from capacity.
Okay,
So
yeah.
yeah, those will likely stay pretty much the same as what we had budgeted. Now, where we'll get the capacity offset is if, again, MISO passes that HUC designation, where Zone 4 capacity price will actually be adjusted to Zone 5 because that resource is being transferred to Zone 5. But yeah, the energy should be no change there.
If I was an executive in the other zones, 1 through 10, I would be having a conversation, at least with the other executives in the zone, saying what's happening and what's the reason for 5 getting slammed. And maybe your recent explanation covers it, but I would be a little nervous if I was sitting in those zones, particularly 1. But is there any link to those for our conversations, what their input is to the overall picture? Or maybe we're just on our own.
No, I mean, no doubt we're all MISO, and so I think those conversations will be had. Like I mentioned, Zone 7, Michigan, this exact same issue happened in 2020. So I think there was likely experience to be learned from them. They cleared at Cone, which was the cost of $252 back then. This happened in MISO-wide, as you know, just a couple of years ago. But I know a call that we had with MPUA was that exact question that you're talking about, because another thing that MISO did, I don't know to what level, but they limited the amount of power that you could import into your zone as capacity. And so Zone 5, just being so limited on land, strictly relied on imports from primarily Zone 4, but even from some down out of MISO South, which is Zones 8 through 10. And for whatever reason, once again, MISO isolated Zone 5 even more by putting a limit on how much you could import in. So that's just another cog in that wheel that the isolated Zone 5.
Again, it gets into speculation, but
Oh, no doubt.
are we the stepchild that's being taken to the woodshed and saying, okay, you're going to be assimilated? I mean, over the next 10 years, we're gonna take you over. Big, big fish, little fish thing. Because if you compound this over the next 10 years, in other words, it keeps going in that direction, certainly it's not sustainable for us as a community. But as a zone, also 5, what happens?
Right.
And again, that's just my wheels turning a little bit, saying, okay, what's the long-term effect?
Well, you see how also the effect, like you already said, what does that affect on your decision-making to put renewable on your home? And that's not much of an uptake here right now, but maybe this is what they're trying to do to make that their push. So again, I don't want to be speculative, but I feel like there's some other goals in sight other than the reliability of our power here in Missouri.
So we have no other options that we can pursue other than
Not that I know
people
of.
choose on their own home to do solar. That's about the only option.
I mean, we're certainly exploring longer-term options, when it comes to our own capacity. We've talked about some other things with that are much longer term, if that's what you're referring to. Our total requirement is around 60, it's between 55 and 60 megawatts. And so anything that we can do to generate our own would take away from that, whether it be the solar project that we're looking at and things like that. So if you're talking about options, those are options that we're already exploring.
Mr. Chairman, would it be appropriate to have public comments at this point, or questions at this point, or what's your pleasure?
I don't know that our guest can input any into this, but I don't think that we've really got any options, so it might be worthwhile putting the new budget to a vote and then move on to the public comments. So I need a motion and a second. Do I hear a motion to approve the modified budget based on MISO's putting us over the barrel?
So moved.
In a second? Begrudgingly, yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. And I know we don't have an opening for public comment, but
You can do that. You can do that.
Mr. Matz, we could certainly add to that if you'd
Please
like.
step to,
Yes, sir.
because it's
Appreciate
recorded.
the opportunity.
Sure.
I actually have 2 questions I'd like to start with, which actually I do believe could have bearing on the budget discussion, but it sounds like that conversation is over unless I've misunderstood. So, but my 2 questions are simple. Darren, one is a follow-up to a question I asked when you came with the stormwater proposal. I'm on the executive board at the Chamber of Commerce. Robert Matz, President, Hannibal LaGrange University. Darren, while we were there, I asked the question at that time of the stormwater proposal as to how our water, its sanitary and electric rates compared to other municipalities in the state of Missouri. You said at that time, and so I'd welcome any correction here if I misunderstood, that our electric rates were slightly above average and that our water and, I guess, sanitary, which I guess those come together, correct? Yes.
They're still separate fees.
Okay, but that are, at least our so is sanitary slightly above and then water,
Is on
you
the
said,
top.
is significantly above.
Correct.
And so, hearing the conversation, I understand the basics of where we are. I'm a civil engineer by training as well, so I do have some training here, just enough to be dangerous. And so my question to the board, obviously I'm here because of a concern about rate increases, which I think you've probably heard some as well, and our rates being, by what you shared at that time, above average for our region and for our state. And so obviously what you just spoke to will affect many of the providers in our region. But being at Hannibal Grange University, and we've made our share of headlines over the course of the last 2 years, we've had to learn to live within our means. And so, is there anything the Board of Public Works can be doing outside of the external factors which it cannot control to help control cost and leave rates without having such a significant impact on us? I'd be curious to hear what the board is doing to look at those non-fixed cost items to help control rates.
So one of the things to know is that when you look at the electric rates in our electric budget, in total, this is going to bring our budget roughly, Paul, you're going to have to give me either a thumbs up, I'm going to give you some rough numbers, is that we have a budget for electric of right around now 24 million. What will this bring our budget to? 31 million. Out of that budget, what we can control is right around 5.5 million.
Okay.
So if you do the math on that, that's a 20%. Now, we've already gone through, even today, we've sat down and we've had that very discussion. Are we as tight as we can be? We've taken our tree trimming, which is something that has already played some great dividends in our reliability. It's reduced the amount of overtime that we have guys being called out. We have the number of employees that we should per our union contract and what we're doing there. I believe we're running a tight ship. Now, is there some other things we can do? We've talked about a couple of things. Number one, the allocation of the cost to the admin that's going to both electric, water, and sewer. And right now, we have it at 50% is being held by the electric department. We believe that we can look at the amount of increase or change in net revenues per department, and that those should be changed appropriately. And that will help save perhaps another couple of $100,000 there. We're going to continue to look at everything we can to cut, to reduce, to make it by. I will simply say we take these increases with absolute 100% seriousness. This is not something that we take in any flippant way at all. And our board doesn't, I do not, neither does my staff. And so we account for every single penny. We know where it's going. We crack the whip on the guys to get efficiencies out of them. Nobody better than that, than Matt Munslinger. And so I will tell you, while yes, you want us to take and let's grind it to the bone, I think we are. And we're also, and that also has to be balanced to what is the expectancy and expectation of our customers. That when the lights go out, do we get them back on?
If you participated in the stormwater discussion, during that discussion, it was pointed out very succinctly that because we are a municipal utility and own our own, now we have to buy our power. I understand back in the day, there was a power plant on the river. We are significantly lower in cost than if we were purchasing, for example, from Ameren. If Ameren was here as a profitable company, our utility rates would be, my guess, 20% higher or better because of that profit motive. We don't have that profit motive.
And
So that's a big savings day to day.
And that certainly makes sense. I think the cause of my question is what I led with, which is we are apparently above average. And so as a result, what are sister utility providers in our state doing to keep their costs lower than where we are? Has that been looked into, or is
Yes.
that something that could be looked into and applied to us as a provider?
We continue to look into that every single day, to be as efficient as we can, to be proactive instead of reactive. And frankly, we'll take a look and see what others are going to do. I will tell you that one of those others that we've talked to are going to have probably a 32% increase in their rates. So where we sit today is not where we're going to be in 6 months from now. So we can keep you informed of that, or at least I'll let the board know, and you can keep up with them. So
Now, your understanding is that we are higher in what?
what my question at the chamber board, which I referenced to a minute ago, was that our end user rate is in comparison with other municipalities that in our state, that our average, that we are slightly above average in electric and significantly above average in water.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that,
I can provide some insight.
do you need to come?
Oh, yeah, sure. So I did run, so it's very difficult, as you know, to compare rate structures among an IOU, an investor-owned utility, versus a municipal like we are, and then I'm blanking on it,
Investor-owned.
a co-op, like Missouri Rural. And so what MPUA did do for us is they provided us what they felt were sister utilities, municipal utilities. And what I did is I plugged in our exact annual rate. I did this back in February for our second largest industrial customer and compared them to those 4 other sister utilities. And I guess I can say this, but those were Nixa, Poplar Bluff, Rolla, and Siloam Springs, which is out of Arkansas. This industrial customer of ours, if they were located in Nixa and had the exact same usage, demand, exact same statistics, would pay 6.7% more in Nixa. They would pay 0.33% more in Poplar Bluff, so essentially the exact same. They'd pay 1.4% more in Rolla and 0.5% less in Siloam Springs. So that's on the electric side. I think your comment that we were right about average would hold true, and that's through February of 2024. So that's not including any rate increases that would be done since then. We did just receive on the water, we get an annual comparison of water and sewer rates by MPUA. They do that in, can't remember when we got that, sometime toward the beginning of the year. And just like last year, we do have the second highest water rates in our category in the state of Missouri. Only Festus is higher. So that comment that, or the statement that you had made that we're much higher than average on the water is accurate.
And we have the GAC, we've got a carbon filter that we're filtering everything through.
That's a result of our improvement of that water plant.
And again, that was again pushed by the vote of the people. That's what the people wanted, and they knew that would be the result, and so we're following through on that. So,
Anytime you have deferred maintenance, as you know, you're gonna pay for that sooner or later, and if you defer it, stormwater or potable water, and that's what happened with the potable water. It was deferred for too many years, and it caught up with us, and so now we're paying for it. Hopefully, and that's the comment. My favorite line item on our budget is the tree trimming. We spent a lot of money on that, and as Darren has alluded to, the return on that day-to-day maintenance is significant. And, we're watching that number pretty closely.
So we're clearly higher on water production. Compared to those other communities, where are we with sanitary sewer?
I'll be honest, I didn't focus quite as much on sewer. The way they had it structured was different with sewer. They did it on a total monthly. But just in looking through it, we were right about average. I think the way they did it was the average residential customer per month, and ours was $45, and it was right in the middle on sewer.
So the similar size population towns that you mentioned, Poplar and Silent, or the different cities, we are real close and slightly lower than 5 and higher than 1.
Correct. Yep. And that's with plugging in an industrial customer. It would be a whole different calculation for residential and the different structures. But that was for industrial, yep.
A second. And
Yep.
actually a comment. But I
Yes,
first
please.
Started with the questions.
Yeah, please.
I'll move to comments, if that's okay.
Yes, yes,
If that's
please.
fine with the board. And I believe y'all know, Betty Anderson used to be on the board, who was representing us in that capacity when she was here on it, and then she moved out of the community. But does that serve y'all's memory correctly as
I
well?
don't know her.
Okay.
She was on the board.
Yes, so she was our former vice president of business
Okay.
Yes.
at the college. My second question, just to one of the comments you made, and so this is just a follow-up there. You just mentioned a second ago, Paul, that our cost in 2017 was actually higher than it is right now. Did I understand that correctly? And second, were our rates higher at that time, or were they the same at that time or lower at that time? Or did I misunderstand? I think you said 23, 24 million for capacity at that point and 21 and a half at this point, but maybe I misunderstood. So,
Pull it up here. I did pull it up while we were talking to double check myself. 2017. When did we go to self-managed? June of 2017. Okay, so yeah, fiscal year 2017, which would have started in July of 2016, our cost was 17.3 million for purchase power. So I misspoke whenever I ran that in my head. I must have been adjusting for inflation. Fiscal year 2016 was 19.2 million, and 2015 was 18.1 million. So before, and then to answer the second part of your question, before the rate increase that we did this year in October of 2023, our last rate increase was actually in 2015.
For the electric, right?
For the
Yes.
electric.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Just electric.
Right, okay.
thank you for that clarification. That just helps put in perspective what's there. And I, of course, on behalf of Hannibal Grange University, appreciate the work of the board and what you do to secure a safe power grid and safe water for our community. As I've shared with Darren previously and with Paul as well, these rate increases are very burdensome on the university. And so that is what I primarily came to speak to. As has been well reported, the university has come through a season of great financial challenge. And in the last year, we were able to offset the cost of the rate increase we received by shuttering an additional building. However, based on enrollment increases, we'll have to bring that building back online. And so we will be absorbing, in effect, in the coming year, the full set of these rate increases there. Many other local utilities, such as, in this case, Ameren, do provide grants to private universities, such as QU, for example, receives a significant grant from Ameren to help with some of their challenges, some of the challenges these rates bring about. That is because, no doubt, that a university is seen as something for the total communal good. I know that may not fit the model of the Board of Public Works at this time, but I would encourage you as a board to consider, are there ways this board can help to build our community? While the university is coming back and will come back stronger than it was, the additional cost that these increases provide, especially on a university that is much reduced from where it was 10 to 15 years ago, can put the university in a more fragile state than we would like to be otherwise. And so we ask for you as a Board of Public Works to consider if there are ways you can support the university in this. And so that is my comment and the one I would like to make in this setting. And I appreciate the opportunity to do so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Great meeting you.
Very nice to meet y'all as well. Can I stick around and listen to the rest of it?
Sure. I got nothing else.
The next item is a motion to adjourn unless we have other discussion.
Not this time.
Did you have, I think we had one other thing that you'd asked about was, what are we doing with our investment, the laddering of, and we're kind of restricted, but again, Paul, you ready for that?
Sure.
All right.
We had it up on the screen, but it's going to be too small to read anyway. But we had asked this question last year when we were looking at, well, really once rates started coming up when it came to CDs and treasuries. And so we reached out and asked our broker to go ahead and do that calculation for us. And he did that for us. And so on our electric portfolio, so the way it works with brokered CDs is they're adjusted to your current market value. You know, if it were a non-brokered CD, you could take that penalty on lost interest and go reinvest it. With a brokered CD, they always adjust it to current market value. And so those 7 or 8 CDs that we had that were making between 0.35 at the lowest percent and 1% at the highest. Those would, if we were to turn those in or redeem those, we would take a loss of $177,000 to adjust them to current market value, basically because they're worthless in today's higher interest rate market. Okay, and so then if you add back the remaining interest that you would have made on those investments, you get about $29,000, and then the interest income that would be generated on a new investment at the 5.5% would give you the same amount of interest over that period of about $212,000. So essentially, we would make by doing that, by redeeming all those old CDs, we would make $6,274 on our electric portfolio. Which is about 3.5% additional. On our pooled portfolio, which is all of our electric, water, and sewer, same calculation would be a loss for us of about $5,600.39. So in the end, we'd gain about $800. So the main issue there is due to them being brokered CDs, they have that adjustment to current market value. Which, if you'll recall, our auditors had done that for us as well. In our audit, they had to do what they call a mark-to-market, where if you have CDs that are basically worthless in today's market, well, we have to recognize that as a loss today because you really have no value. You don't have the same value in those investments that you did when you took them out. So that's a very good question. Would make a lot of sense if we could do that, which we very well could, but there's just not any value to be gained.
But the new ones, as they're rolling in, we're taking and reinvesting at the new higher rates and getting the best we can. The state of Missouri only allows us to do CDs. We can't do anything else. So that's the only mechanism we have to take and invest and get anything. So that was the question. Those interest rates have been coming up. That's been good, but could we jump into those, take the penalty? And the penalty is greater because it's a brokered item.
That's a good thing for the public to understand. In particular, our hands are tied significantly on what investments we can make. Basically, we have to go to banks, and we cannot look for better yields because of the state law, which costs us significant monies in any positive environment or economy. So we're not real happy about it, but it is what it is.
Well, I brought this question up and asked Daryl to have Paul look at it. And my perspective is personal. You get a CD, and your penalty for getting rid of it is 1 month of interest. So take that back at 0.25%, and I'll take a 5.5% one to replace it. I don't know anything about brokered CDs at all. So, not from that world. Don't have any clue. and can't learn it here in 2 seconds.
Very good question. Thank you.
All right, appreciate your work on that, Paul. All right. Any other discussion?
Nothing.
Haven't heard none. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
And a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're done.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
And we do have a May 7th session scheduled for tomorrow evening.
Right.